Okay, so today here's what we're going to do. We're going to work on multiplying radicals. And the nice part about multiplying radicals is it's very similar to what we did on Tuesday and on Monday. Because when you're multiplying radicals, you're just going to times square roots together. So as long as they have a square root, you can multiply these things together. So both these things have a square root, we'll multiply them both together, and we'll get the square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is the square root of 9. Well, we know what the square root of 9 is. The square root of 9 is 3. That's how you multiply radicals. You just take this square root, times it by that square root, get that. Now here's something that I have to make sure that you don't do. If you say that 2 times radical 14 is radical 28, you are dead wrong. That does not work. 2 times radical 14 is 2 times radical 14. The reason I can't multiply them is radical 14 is not a nice whole number. If you look on your calculator, it's probably, close to 4. So 2 times radical 14 is really pretty close to 8. But it's not close to radical 28, because if you do radical 28, you get that's 5. So you can't multiply a non-radical and a radical together. The most I can do is just combine those things and make them look as nice as possible. So now that we realize that non-radicals and radicals don't multiply together, but radicals do, let's see some of the more interesting kinds of things. Let's take some examples. Okay, so when you look at example 1, you have radical 5 times radical 7, and you go, oh, radical 5 times radical 7. Oh, that's going to be, well, this has a radical, and this has a radical, so we can multiply them together. You get the square root of 35. Then you might look at the square root of 35 and go, can this simplify? And the answer, no, because it's made up of 5 and 7. Neither of those things you can take the square root of. And if you can think of another thing that multiplies together to give you 35, you're better than I am. So that is our final answer. And this side, we have a slightly different example. This thing doesn't have a radical, but this thing does. So I'm going to rearrange this. Technically, there's a multiplication symbol in between there, so I'm going to rearrange it. I'm going to move the 8 closer to the 5, and just keep that 4 right there. Well, 8 times 5 is 40, and so we'll have 40 radical 4. And I just realized that I picked a terrible radical number, because what you could do with radical 4 is you could say radical 4 is 2. You could say 40 times 2 is 80. So at the end, always look to see if you can simplify this radical. Sometimes you will, sometimes you won't. In that case, we could. Let's do a couple more examples. The nice part is this is going to be our last 3 examples. And so here's what we're going to do. Let's figure out what multiplies together to give us some of this stuff. So I have the square root of 15 and the square root of 30. So we'll multiply these together. And this should give me the square root of, well, I have no clue what 30 times 15 is off the top of my head, 450. Now that was the easy part. The hard part is going to be simplifying this square root that we now have. So we got to try to simplify this. Here's one thing I noticed, and you'll start to get better. I noticed that this first number is 45, and I know 45 is divisible by 9, and I know 9 is a really good square root to have. So I'm going to divide that by 9 real quick, and we get 50. So this thing would break into the square root of 9 and the square root of 50. So that would be 3 radical 50. Now, we would hope that we would be able to stop here, but when I look at this, I know that 50 is going to be able to be broken down, for sure, because 50 is made up of 25 and 2. And I know that the square root of 25 can give me 5. So if I keep going, this thing right here should be 3 times 5 times radical 2. And if we combine that, we would get 15 radical 2. And that would be my final answer. Okay? So the easy part is, since both those things have square roots, we can multiply them together. The hard part is simplifying after the fact. Here's this one. Again, I'm going to rearrange this problem right off the bat. So I'm going to rearrange this to be 8 times 3 and radical 26 times radical 12. So that's going to give me 24. And again, I'm going to use my calculator. So 26 times 12, 312. So again, that was the easy part. The easy part was multiplying the things together. The hard part is going to be breaking apart 312. Now, we want to, again, for 312, we want to pick numbers that we know are square roots. I'm going to try 16 because 16 seems like something that might divide this. And it didn't. So we got unlucky. Well, I'm pretty sure 4 would divide this. And I'm right. So we would have, in this spot, 24. Radical 4 and radical 78. That would give me 2, so I'd have 48 radical 78. Okay, now we have 78 to deal with. Now we're just going to try a couple things with 78 because I don't know how much we could do. So is it divisible by 4? Nope, 78 isn't divisible by 4. Is it divisible by 25? Nope. Is it divisible by 64? Nope. Is it divisible by other perfect square roots? So what I'm trying, or what I'm thinking about trying, is like 4, 9, 25. Well, I missed 16 in here, but 36. So we can try all these factors. Let's try 36. That's the only other one that I think might work. Nope. So 78 doesn't divide any further, and that would be my final answer. It's important, though, that we still check this and see if there's any one of these like nice square roots that you've been working with. If you remember in previous videos, I said you want to have a list of these square roots that you kind of run through and see if it divides. So that would be our final answer for that problem. Let's do this one last problem. So again, this is going to be very similar. We're going to take this and this, and we're going to multiply them together. So I'm going to rearrange and get 7 times 2. And then I'm going to get radical 14 times radical 10. And 7 times 2 is 14. And radical 14 times 10 is 140. And again, that's the easy part. The hard part is trying to see what divides this. And we already know 14 and 10 are not going to be what we want to try to divide 140 by. A lot of times when I have numbers that ends in 0, I like to see if 25 will divide it. So we'll take 140 and try to divide it by 25. And it didn't work. The other things I like to try when it ends in zeros is 4. So we're going to take 140 divided by 4 and get 35. Perfect. So now I know I have 14, radical 4, radical 35. At this stage right here, I would say, okay, well, 14, the square root of 4 is 2, and then we have radical 35. We found earlier that radical 35 doesn't reduce, so that's a good thing for us. And we know 2 times 14 is 28, so this would be my final answer. Here's the nice part that you're going to have with MathSpace tomorrow. At MathSpace, if you wrote this answer down and you weren't sure if it's simplified, if you type it in and hit enter, it will give you a green check mark if it does. If it doesn't, and it gives you a yellow check mark, you go, oh, there's some more stuff that I could do. So the biggest thing here is, like, you want to make sure that you multiply the square roots together and the numbers together, and then simplify the best you can. If you have any issues, please let me know.